How about, do you remember? You remember the Bugman? Oh boy, was that before your time? We used to have a guy.
No, the guy
fumigating. And we all wonder why some of us glow in the dark when that guy used to come down and bomb the whole town with this fog of insect repellent, and the kids would just run behind this thing like it was a ice cream truck. And
When we were really small and nobody had refrigerators, they used to have a truck come around with delivering blocks of ice. And we'd run down the street behind it and jump on the truck and grab a great big handful of ice and suck on it.
Told me was that they would have horse-drawn garbage trucks, and one of the kid pranks was when the man went to bring the garbage can back to the back of the house, they would get up in the second-story window and shoot the horse in the rear end with a BB gun, and the horse would go running down the street with the garbage thing. You know?
A load of wood was delivered to our house. The Mr. Papworth, who also was the fire department full-time employee, he backed his wagon up the driveway, and all of us, at one point, the alarm went off, the fire alarm. The horses took off down the driveway, made a quick right turn and dumped the load on the street, went galloping throughout the town. Of course, Mr. Papworth was on our driveway looking. He couldn't do anything. And about a half hour later, he had gone back to the firehouse. About a half hour later, the horses showed up at the fire department. They were panting, and they were drinking out of the water fountain there, the water tub, to cool off.
High atop a bluff on the North Jersey shore sits a 6-block town bordering the Atlantic Ocean and a branching lake. Here are some of the memories from those who lived during the 100 years which made Allenhurst the most impressive seaside community in the U.S. In the late 1890s, the evolution of attractive farmland into a prosperous and beautiful summer resort took many years in most instances. The single exception was Allenhurst. But long before this transformation, it was Abner Allen who in the 1830s downed trees and developed 120 acres into a farm and summer boarding house. He was the first Deal Beach postmaster and one of the original 14 keepers for the volunteer U.S. Life-Saving Service. The service's station stood at the foot of the tidal inlet called Corley's Pond, now Deal Lake. In 1854, the infamous wreck of the immigrant ship New Era would shatter a cold November tranquility and inspire the creation of the U.S. Coast Guard.
Life-saving station was right down there on this alongside of the inlet. I remember the life-saving station. It was still there even after Bradley closed the inlet and put Ocean Avenue through. Back in the sailing ship days, it was hardly a month went by, especially during the winter, that a boat didn't come ashore.
Yeah.
So by the hundreds, you've probably read too, that people who climbed in the rigging to try to escape being washed overboard could see right up Deal Lake and see Sunset Lake, and everything looked so near and it was so far. That's almost sounds as if the captain was trying to aim for the inlet and get into the inlet where it was safe.
Yeah.
To shoot the line out to him.
Yeah.
for Beach's buoy, and it was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And the crew stood on shore helplessly watching the people drown. And that record that I recall reading was that there were 426 passengers and 240 perished.
Yeah.
In the latter part of the 1800s, the area which is now Allenhurst was occupied by the Allen boarding house and 2 or 3 other homes, including the estate of Gilbert Spear. John Hathaway owned a Hathaway House Hotel just to the north. The Allen House welcomed many prominent people from Philadelphia and New York, including Edwin Benjamin. On April 26, 1895, the Coast Land Company, under Benjamin and James Ralston, purchased the Allen Farm and planned to develop a refurbished hotel and a splendid resort. Since 1857, Gilbert Spear, a New York Supreme Court justice, had a choice stretch of property on the 25-foot-high bluff. His home was surrounded by century-old cedars, white pines, and holly trees. In 1897, the Coast Land Company purchased Spear's home and tract, and within 24 hours, 200 laborers were on the site to lay down new streets and 2 new homes. Hoxter met Judge Spear's son in Manhattan.
1967, 30 years ago.
And you sat
to Dr. Spear, and I asked him how he spelled his name, and it was the same as where I lived. And I said, gee, that's funny. I live on Spear Avenue in Allenhurst. He said, well, that's even funnier. I said, when I was a boy, my father and Mr. Allen owned the whole town. It was one big farm, which probably put it back around 1870, 1880, because Dr. Spear was, I'd say, a man about 80 years old when I met him.
The old Allen House was now the impressive Allenhurst Inn. It could now accommodate 350 guests and became the center of Allenhurst social life. E.P. Benjamin lived at Judge Spear's former home at Cedar and Ocean Avenues until his new home was erected. A wagonette could be used for people to take a trip to the beach. It cost 3 cents a ride. streets were macadamized with 735 carloads of gravel. Imported fine bluestone was used for sidewalks. 3 artesian wells, 550 feet deep, were dug at Main Street. A sophisticated sewer system was in place. Here, E.P. Benjamin enjoys a summer afternoon at Judge Spear's former home. Between dusk and twilight, dozens of handsome homes and cottages appeared. In 2.5 years, 158 handsome homes were standing. Elizabeth Manziano has a relic from the Coastland Company's enterprising past.
In the kitchen, we were taking the walls down, the wallpaper and the boards, because we were reconfiguring the entranceway. And when we did that, the back of the boards were stamped Coast Lumber Company or Coast Land Company. Actually, I don't remember if it was Coast Land or Coast...
Yes, must have been Coast Land, yeah.
Coast Land Company.
Right.
And they were all sort of branded in on each board. And I thought that was rather interesting because they are the original people who developed Allenhurst, I understand.
Ned Ralston's uncle, James Ralston, early mayor and co-organizer of the borough, lived on Cedar Avenue near Norwood, once called Main Street, the Golden Road, named for its Belgian golden brick pavement.
I was born in 1898. Howard Height. Mm-hmm. He was a plumber. Tilton, he's the one that had the dairy there in Hume Street. I knew him well. There's Cade. And yeah, I think we're just talking about had the trolley climb. Eskew and White. And Campbell, White and Campbell lived next door to each other on Spear Avenue. And the railroad and the automobile, or the trolley car. Steinbach, as I told you about the girl here. Right. And I knew Walter Steinbach very well. Hugh Wilson and Allenhurst was the head of the other bank, Seacoast Trust Company. It wasn't a race. They'd race back from, they'd be up to Rumson in their buggies. Both of them must have been half drunk. And we could hear them coming home down Main Street when they lived on El Dorado, when I lived on
Could you hear the carriage sounds?
Yeah, you could hear them going like a plump, 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 plump. I was a little kid like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
At the turn of the century, there was a baseball field and playground between Allen and Elberon Avenues. Guests from the Allenhurst Inn, the Curlew, and the Dunes shared this facility. At the end of Allen Avenue was a fine wooden beach pavilion. Lewis Ennis ran 128 bathhouses. There were separate facilities for men and women. The pavilion's chairs were supplied from the Monmouth Park grandstand.
Block like this, there's nothing but sand, and the bases were blocks. And I remember I hit a home run from one street all the way over the next corner.
Deal too that way.
The city hall was on top of the firehouse. Margaret Piles was there, and Althea Brown. We used to go there for books. If the books weren't there, they used to order. It was like a library. And Havens was the police chief, and Piles and a few others. We knew them all.
People used to come by train to Allenhurst, the early inhabitants, the summer ones. And there used to be an express company, Piles Express, what was the name of the other one? That used to bring all their luggage to the houses.
And American Express also had an office there, Mary, where they would, a lot of the items were delivered by express.
The train station was the finest of its kind. Styled in Gothic architecture with white enamel brick and brownstone trimming, it was Allenhurst Reception Hall. It cost $1.15 for a one-way ticket to New York.
We had just moved into our new house, 201 Grassmere Avenue, Lincoln. And I got a job that summer with Pages Express, who had a freight station, had an office by the freight station there in the Allenhurst Depot. And I got a job sitting in his office answering the phone, taking calls for, remember Pages Express? First on wagon. Yep. And it seemed to me Earl Pile's father, named Pile, and also used the same service.
Area was all a garden area. There was a big pond in the center, and there were a colonnade all the way around it, a path, blue stone path you'd walk through, and there were benches you could sit down. It was really a very relaxing place.
And that building there, for years, that was the first building where Welsh House was in, and they moved across the street.
Oh, okay.
But Archie Hyde, hell, I know him well.
He wrote an article.
Archie Hyde had 2 or 3 brothers, and I knew them all.
Main Street, and where the card shop is, that was the Empire Market, and they were from Madison Avenue.
Yeah, they were butchers down there, and they were in the store close closest to the lake, and at the other end of this thing was a store called Kuhlman, Kuhlman. And I remember my mother used to shop there. Did a little bait to fish down at the lake. They'd give us some cuttings of meat cuttings, which we'd use in lieu of worms.
It was a dirty place.
He was the only plumber around. He did all the work around town. Archie, Harry, and Earl. Yeah.
You'll find the 75th anniversary book mentions the fact that he worked as a plumber when the town was being originally built.
For someone else. Yeah.
No, when it was originally being built, and then later on, he started his own business. And I think there were 3 brothers, all in the business, and they knew every foot of piping in this town. And we used to get our trolley tickets once a month in Wiltshires, in the cashier's cage. There was one of the bot girls, was also worked for the school board. And that's where we'd get our tickets for the trolley district with food stores in it. We had the Oxford Market that in the summer it would open up and there would be actually sawdust out on the sidewalk.
I remember that.
And it was a very busy place. We had Wiltshausen, which
but
is
most
very
of their business was done by. They used to go to the house and take
Salesmen
orders.
used to go to house.
Take orders from the maids, you know.
And I remember that there was all the streets were gravel streets.
Mm-hmm.
Trucks used to come down, oil them. And it was a rather pleasant smell, I thought. Keep the dust down.
Uncle Jim's house was next door. Here's the riding stable.
Mm-hmm.
And right next door are the greenhouses. There's the greenhouses here.
Now, where were these places?
Hey, this is on Cedar Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Cedar Avenue between the trolley tracks and Main Street.
Mm.
See, here's the greenhouses.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been there hundreds and hundreds of times.
Prior to 1926, Main Street did not pass through Scott Park. By 1903, the new Allenhurst Club was standing. Its construction started after the original Allenhurst Inn burnt down in 1901. The club was made of the fine Fisher brick, and it was probably the finest hotel on the shore. The club itself was lost to fire in 1929. Subsequently, a less impressive structure was built, and it was finally taken by demolition workers in 1956.
This is the place that burned down.
Right.
And my father was in that when it burned.
Was the place, absolutely the place. Everybody loved it. It was revelry all the time, drinking, partying, and it was extremely fashionable and extremely elegant, and people came from all over New York and summered down there. Adelaide, who was known as a spitfire, sort of a really charming, beautiful gal, and all the boys were always after her, and she once had 2 guys fighting over her, and one threw a punch at the other guy, and he fell into the fireplace, cracked open his skull, and died. And the Allenhurst Inn was closed. for quite a time over that while it was investigated, but of course it was just accident and nothing ever came of it. It was just one of those tragedies. And of course later it burned down.
The Allenhurst Inn welcomed guests such as Hubert Parsons, Congressman Belden of New York, William Randolph Hearst, the great tenor Caruso, and Sir Thomas Lipton, the America's Cup challenger in 1899 and 1900. Both times he was a guest of Benjamin.
And I remember the old Allenhurst Inn, of course. I used to play there in the dance band. Very popular local dance band, and we were very busy. We played, even in the wintertime, 2 or 3 nights a week.
What were you called? What was the...
Well, the leader of the band was Toddy Hoyt, and called it Toddy Hoyt and his Red Coats, because we all wore red coats in the band. Anywhere from 5 pieces to, in the summertime, in the summer of 1934 in the Edward Park Casino, we had a 16-piece band there.
The residents, that is the tenants, would rent rooms basically in the hotel, and those who had a family would rent the cottages. There are a number of cottages east of the hotel, and they would get their meals either carried to them by butlers. They'd be in the summer they would be walking from the hotel to the cottages carrying a big tray with all of the food on to the individual cottages. And there were parties thrown down almost every weekend. There were parties there at the
Cottages were for those who preferred privacy. These so-called toy houses were built without kitchens, but many times the cottage guests would have to go to the main hotel dining room for dinner. Twin-screw steamers were now frequently running from Rector Street in New York to Sandy Hook. A busy New York businessman could leave New York after 5 p.m. and reach Allenhurst for a plunge in the surf before dinner. Lock Harbor had several impressive hotels also, but Allenhurst had 5. The different versions of the Allenhurst Inn, the Curlew, the Dunes, the Norwood, and the Cedars, which was transformed from the old Gilbert Spear home.
During the summer, we stayed at the Cedars, and my parents liked Allenhurst so much that they bought a house in the middle 30s first. And then it was turned into a hotel. And the main entrance was actually from Ocean Avenue on a driveway that went under a big porte-cochere that went through and out around. It was large. It took over half the block. You can almost tell where it stops because I think that's where the really older houses start. I mean, Pietri's was first, and then there were a whole series. But it was that entire half, more than half. And when you went in, there was a dining room, a very large dining room on one side. And they used to bring chimes, they hit the little bong, bong, bong. And there was a colored waiter named Barker. It was very funny. That's why I remember him. I mean, I was little and he'd make faces. It was silly. I think he also had a crush on my nursemaid. In those days, everybody had a nursemaid. That was on one side, and then on the other, I guess it was more like a living room or something. Stairs went up with a large landing, a big window. And then there were rooms on both sides of the hall, but we were off in a wing. To the right, we had like a suite. It was 2 bedrooms with a bath in the middle and a porch in the back.
Doc bought it. They built it. They bought the property over on Cedar and Ocean in 1948, and then they built the house. There was nothing there at that time. There had been a large building there, which had been an inn, and then it was converted to a boys' school. An empty lot, and they bought it and built the house, and they wanted a 1-story house because Dad always was thinking of the future, and if whenever he became bedridden or something, that he wouldn't have to worry about stairs, so that's exactly what happened. Mother was very insistent that they would not be touched. No, the staircase and the posts were there. And if you look on Ocean Avenue, there's one left, because there used to be a driveway, and the sidewalk still shows it. There was a driveway that must have gone into, I don't know, the side of the house, of the inn, of the Cedars, or whatever it was.
Exactly.
So Mother always said, I don't want that column removed either. So that sits there all by itself.
Exactly.
The Norwood Hotel was a hotel of 40 rooms. It was located at Corley's and Ocean Avenues. The Curlew was located on Allen Avenue opposite the pool. It burnt down in 1931.
And they blew their whistle there, and they went up, and another guy and I went up, and we were at Allenhurst and saw it. Stood right there watching it burn down.
Wow.
By the pool.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't go in then because it started on Ocean Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't get down the street.
Prior to the borough's incorporation in April 1897, the massive Dunes Hotel stood on the unprotected sand bluff at the end of Corley's Avenue. During the summer of 1912, the recent Titanic disaster widow, Mrs. Benjamin Guggenheim, was summering on Spear Avenue. It was during that summer that the Dunes was lost to fire.
Tinderwood, you know, old dried out lumber, strong east wind blowing, fanning the flames.
These people.
Do you remember when that burned
But
down?
most of them you didn't see walking.
Mm-hmm.
They went in a carriage or in a Victoria. My aunt had a Victoria.
What was it like?
With horses.
Right.
And the driver would be up top on this, and we'd be sitting back there. And no, it was very, very nice. Here's
The Dunes.
I saw that burn.
You did?
Here's the pool's right over here. Fire was burning. Yeah, it was really, the whole thing was on fire. And it was this side of the casino.
Do they have fire trucks or anything like that? Or
Oh yeah, fire trucks were there. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
But I do agree with Jack that the houses seem to take on the character of the prominent owners, so that they do get to be known by the name of the prominent families who occupied them.
Oh, the Whalens were fabulous people. They were fabulously wealthy because of the drug company, drugstores, Whalen Drugs. And Clara Whalen had two boys, twin boys, and they dated my mother. And they also lived in New York, and my mother would say she would take them to tea at the plaza during the winter, every Saturday. And she was very eccentric, but money to burn.
Well, it used to be called the Spalding House, and it was the Spalding people that were the Spalding sports people. I was married in 1947, and my in-laws, the Tracys, gave us the house as a wedding present. And we looked at many houses, and when I walked in here and I saw the staircase, I thought, oh, this is wonderful. And I thought, what a wonderful house for a wedding. And little did I know that I would have 6 daughters that would eventually, most of them, get married. In fact, all of them have been married in this house. There used to be, I think there's a picture that we have seen. There was a big wraparound porch. There was a portico out front, and it went up to the second floor. And there was a porch up on the second floor also. And it was very different. There were dormers on all the windows on the on all the rooms on the third floor. There was a porte cochere over the driveway.
My mother lived in Allenhurst. My grandmother lived in Allenhurst. Of course, she wasn't a Conover, but my grandmother lived at Allen and Norwood Avenue. Subsequently was the house that we had sold to Bob Considine and Millie.
Purchased the house on Allen Avenue, just 2 doors from us. And I distinctly remember he wrote in his column shortly after he purchased the house. He purchased this beautiful home in Allenhurst. It was so lovely that he felt that when he would open a closet door, he would probably find a mink coat in it.
In 1898, America's victory in the Spanish-American War would make the U.S. a world power. It would also inspire President McKinley's brother to construct a tower on his Ocean Avenue home. William McPhail remembers.
Victory March from there after the Spanish-American War.
Allenhurst seemed like a little town lost in time. It's like everything else at the shore had just gone on, and Allenhurst stayed this way. People were sort of content to leave things alone. We looked at about 2 or 3 houses, and I remember the day we walked up the walk to this house. There was something about it. I think it's the tower. It's sort of gets you from the outside. And as we walked up the walk, I just sort of felt, this is my house. So the house, it was originally built across the street. Allen family came to Allenhurst before the town was actually founded. They decided that they wanted the house across the street, but they wanted it over here. Now, Cecil Scatorcio's house belonged to one of their family members, and Mary Kay's house on this side belonged to their members. This, I think, was one of the sisters got this house. So there were 3 Allens in a row.
It was by Fisher Brick Company. They were manufacturers of brick. It was all red brick, a beautiful building. It was all very large. Larry Reynolds. His name was Larry Reynolds, and he had a monoplane on his lawn.
It was a toy.
No, it was not. It was a real airplane.
I know, but
He was
treated
always
it like a toy.
he was always working on it.
He didn't fly it. It stayed there in the
He
lawn.
used to start it up every once in a while too.
We bought the house in 1941, and we lived in it in the 50s, in the early 50s.
After the war.
Yeah, after the war. In fact, Rutledge Greer was stationed in that house while he was in service up here. 28 rooms and 8 bedrooms. And it was a beautiful house. But it got so that we couldn't rent it to anybody. In fact, when we lived there, we couldn't even go out because we couldn't get any babysitters to take care of the kids. They were afraid in a big house. It was such a big house. No matter how much money we paid in refacing the bricks, we could never stop the water from coming in. We couldn't do the whole job. It was a fortune to try to do the whole job. So we had no alternative but to tear it down.
big, and it opened onto the sun porch and looked into the dining room, which had a refectory table that was 15 feet long. Was going out to the porch. You stepped down, and then it was all screened in, 75 feet of it. Well, I'm just trying to think of it. Oh, my aunt had a room on the 3rd floor in the southwest room, and she had a basket on a ribbon or a string that she would let down, and we would put it in her glasses or anything she'd forgotten, and she'd pull it up. And we used to call it the, wait a minute, just a second, the Pony Express. So one time he had a Pekingese dog. She called him up and he didn't come. So we put him in the Pony Express and she pulled him up and he never moved. I think he was terrified he was going to fall.
So, my grandmother owned the house back in the late 40s, early 50s. So my mother's been coming down for summers back since then. And then my family have been coming down pretty much all my life since the early 60s. And recently my parents just renovated the house to have heat because it never had heat before. So now they've moved down permanently only just a few years ago. So I tell you that you could tell what was most fun. Now we used to have to pack into 2 different cars and coming over the bridge. When you came over the bridge, what you remember most was like just being in Allenhurst. And at that time, growing up, there were still a lot of summer residents. So the town was very, very quiet. And when we'd come down for a weekend prior to the summer, you almost look around to see who else was down. And it was so much fun. You grab your bag, you throw it up to your room, and you go scrambling around for your friends that were year-round residents. And it was always a sense of this was home. Even though we were only here 2 or 3 months a year, this was home. This is where we had a lot of our action. And we never went on vacation. This was our vacation, and so that was what I remember most. It was really a lot of fun.
Great. Mr. and Mrs. Joe McDonough speak of their home on the corner of Norwood and Corley's Avenues.
The house was built in just about 1900. And if you look at the pictures, there are no other houses in this area. And also, even the water lines in Allenhurst, when they first put in drinking water, they zigzagged the water lines down Corley's Avenue. Some of the pipes are on our side and some on the other side of the street. And they just put the water in as the people built the house.
The Victorian eclectic home on the corner of Spear and Ocean Avenue inspired a chapter in F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic from 1920, This Side of Paradise.
My grandmother and grandfather were driving by, wanting a summer home in the area. They were from New York City. And my grandmother spotted this magnificent house with the towers, and he said, oh gosh, I'll see if it's for sale, but I don't know. And it turned out it was just on a fluke, because the person who had it built the first railroad in Mexico, and he became a millionaire. But then overnight the government took over the railroad and he lost everything, and the house had to be sold. And it's all brick. If that house were to be what you see demolished, it would still stand totally brick inside, and it cost a fortune. I think the man that built it just had money to burn at the time, because he was so wealthy, and so he just decided, I will pull out all the stop dates, and this is it, and it'll last forever.
Mr. McCarthy, father bought that house for his mother, who died before she ever moved into it, and he slept in the same bedroom from the time he was 12, and he died when he was 82, I think.
He originated Wild Turkey, the bourbon. Wild Turkey bourbon was his baby, and he named it.
All right.
Yep. He, for a long time, had the record of the largest fish ever caught on rod and reel, and I've got a picture in there. It's a swordfish. Interesting. My grandfather had a boat which he used to keep at Shark River Inlet, and it was a fishing boat. But he also used to keep a boat on the beach. It was a little bigger than a lifeguard boat, and it was called the Juliana. And one day, Grandpa's boat captain said, "Can I borrow the boat, the small boat, and take it out?" This was during the war. With my brothers, my 3 brothers, and Grandpa said, "Sure." And he took the boat from the beach during the war and never came back. And they never found a trace of it. And so this poor woman that was the mother of the Brock boys, Grandpa supported her for the rest of her life. A terrible tragedy is what they think happened, was that a sub took it out.
Around 1920, according to Grandpa McCarthy, he would hold boxing matches between local boys, young men, so forth, and then the working people. There'd be gardeners, there'd be chauffeurs, and they would box for money in the barn behind the house at 29 Spear Avenue. He was saying that occasionally, in the summertime, there was a great training facility at Ross Fenton Farms in Wanamassa, and Gene Tunney would train there. And he had heard from around, from people that these boxing matches were going on, and he would actually come over and go to the barn and referee some of these matches that were held there. And a lot of money had apparently traded changed hands, and McCarthy, Grandpa, was only a late teenager, maybe his early 20s, and it all ended when his father found out that there was a huge gambling facility on the property.
Tom McCarthy Sr. used to have movies every Saturday night. And about
at his house?
Yeah, at his house. These are silents, but about 50 kids would show up. And first they'd play games across the street in the vacant lot. It was called Kellogg's Lot. And then everybody would adjourn to the house and watch these movies. The various kids were asked to perform. So some would dance, some would sing, some would recite a poem. And I was in a quartet. I remember one song we used to sing was Lucky Lindy. That was right after Lindbergh came back. And then there were the Whalens across the street had a tennis court, and the McLaughlins across the street from here had a paddle tennis court, right, which was just Mayorine back of me had a tennis court. So just this one block alone, there were 1, 2, 3 tennis courts and a paddle tennis. Any day of the week, you could get up enough guys for a touch football game or a softball game, something like that. There were a couple of lots that we played on around here. One was called Kellogg's Field opposite McCarthy's house. If we didn't play, we'd play baseball there against some fellows from Asbury Park called the Freedman Gang. And
yes, they have built houses on some of the lots that, I mean, we used to call it Riley's Field, and we don't play softball there when we were kids. And they owned the house, the brick house, the Tudor house. And he never wanted to build there because he wanted his view of the ocean. So that was, when that went, we were all very, very sad.
How do you think we felt?
Right. And then right across the street was Mr. McCarthy's, where they built that house.
Yeah,
and
they used to play a lot of games over
a lot of that. And then my son-in-law, Nina's husband, had a garden there. He asked Mr. McCarthy if it was all right, and Mr. McCarthy said yes, as long as you paid the water bill, it's okay. And so Scott built this huge garden there, and he used to come from New York for weekends to take care of it.
I remember.
Well, Riley, W.B. Riley was, I believe, the richest one in Allenhurst. She was a Hartford, and it was quite a saying around town that she got $1 a day from each empty store. And it was 5,000 stores.
Where did she live?
15 Cedar. And she used to tip us $5 a week. You know, back in the 20s and 30s, that was a lot of money. Brand new $5. When she used to leave, $50. When we had every morning we had to wash her porch. Once a week we washed the porch, and every day we mopped it. The grounds for Whalen. He was Charles Whalen. He was head of the Whalen drugstore. That was a big chain. And he was the only one in Allenhurst with a Rolls Royce. And he used to go in from Ocean Place and come out on Spear Avenue. He used to go right around it, through the garage and out on Spear Avenue. There was an error. He invented the air and cream separator. He lived on a corner of Cedar and Ocean. George Lyons, he lived over there on, what was it, 115? He invented a bumper on a car, the adjustable bumper on a car. And Henry Ford copied it. And he sued them. And I don't know where he got $1 million or something like that. And my father was walking down the drive one day and he was jumping in the air. He said, I just won $1 million from Henry Ford. In fact,
I admire Mr. Fitkin for a very personal reason. Mr. Fitkin gave the money. After my father died when he was very young and working for Mr. Fitkin. And Mr. Fitkin gave the money to the Jersey Shore Medical Center, the forerunner of that, which was the Fitkin Memorial Hospital. I admire him because he pledged the money in June or July of 1929, and the crash was in October, I believe. And after he had pledged $500,000, and he had to sell $1 million of securities to get that $500,000. They lived in a big house on the corner that burned down eventually, but it was a great big house, regular a beach house, summer house, although I think it had heat. But anyway, but he owned that whole property on the corner. So one time he used to go abroad, of course, and he was in Spain. And he modeled the Fitkin bungalow after a Spanish hacienda. The point of it, at the courtyard with the fountain and the heavy wooden doors. And then my cousins, Billy and Ralph Fitkin, added the bar downstairs. You know the bar. It's it's a boat. It's a ship. And do you know what it is around the scenery? It's Bermuda. They had been to Bermuda, and so they did Bermuda. First, they had this. When you went aboard, you went up a gangplank, and you looked to the left, and there was this lovely shiny deck, just like a ship, and then there was this huge steering wheel at the end.
Joyce Fitkin Denny recalls her years in Allenhurst.
The pool, I believe that's 16 Corleys. There were two houses, 16 and 18 Corleys. And the large White House, which is no longer there, it burned down. I just saw 6 bungalows out in California, so he built a bungalow and moved, literally, the big house right across the street from the pool, the beach club, the Allenhurst Beach Club.
In the 1930s, 21 Spear Avenue resident Judge Walsh would entertain Franklin Roosevelt and presidential candidate Al Smith. Another Spear Avenue resident was Al Hoxter.
The construction of this house, I mean, this is pretty unique, all with the stained glass windows and all that kind of
I don't know too much about it. It was built by a vice president of Gimbel Brothers in those days, and I think his name was Von Dolan, and his name is in the stained glass window at the head of the stairs there. And I think somebody told me that saw him down in Florida that he just died a few years ago. I always wondered if he was ever going to come back and look at it.
Actually, there is a picture of Babe Ruth at the beach club. Grandpa knew Babe Ruth. Grandpa was recruited for the Red Sox when he was very young. And I don't know whether he was cut from the string or whether he decided to go into business. He was a marvelous athlete and a fabulous baseball player. But I actually do have pictures of Grandpa and Babe Ruth, which are supposedly valuable because there's very few pictures of Babe Ruth in the Red Sox uniform.
It's figures.
Well, the only one I can remember was Babe Ruth. And he used to visit the Weisbeckers here that lived on the corner of Spear and Norwood. And actually they knew him from, they lived in the same apartment house up and around 90th Street and Riverside Drive. So they'd have him down several times over the summer. And he was always a very gregarious person, and we'd play a little croquet with him in the backyard, and every time he'd send us down the block, we'd just start howling with laughter. It was really quite a funny sight. I don't think the croquet was a very serious game. And so everybody liked him, and he was a lot of fun.
And the power plant was in Allenhurst, and it was called Atlantic Coast Electric Company, and it was right at the where the present light company has their offices there. That big building, across from the car barn, and the same company ran the trolley cars as ran the electric system. It was Atlantic Coast Electric and Railway System.
Great many other ways in those days. Everybody used the trolleys. Everybody loved the trolley cars. From the time they started as horse cars in 1887 or something like that, until they went out of business in 1931, all during that first 3 decades of 1900, everybody and their brother owned the trolley cars. It was a popular means of public transportation. We rented a house in Allenhurst, number 1 Page Avenue, the very first house in Allenhurst over the line. And at that time, the trolley cars went right past the door.
We had to go on the trolley cars to Asbury Park schools. And we used to get the trolley car right at the corner of L. Brown Avenue and Page Avenue. And we could hear the trolley with the noise coming down the hill from Deal, and then we'd run out to catch a trolley. And then when there was a lot of snow, the actual trolley cars didn't run. There used to be a trolley car that we used to call the snowplow trolley. And we used to walk to the car barn to get it to go to school.
And actually, it was the Model T Ford, the old Tin Lizzie, which when it started being reproduced in such great numbers at such low prices, it helped put the trolley cars out of business. And but in those days, clean, quiet, no air pollution. Too bad they did away with them. Replaced them with smelly buses polluting the atmosphere.
I've enjoyed working here. It's 30 years has gone by real fast. Been a lot of good times. There's been some tough times, but the town really hasn't changed that much. Just some names and some new residents being built, houses being torn down or destroyed by fire. A small community. The officer here, he has to do everything. We don't have a detective bureau, we don't have a traffic bureau, so the officers here are all part and parcel of that. They just do everything. You know, we have a service here in town where if you go away on vacation or if your house is going to be empty for a short period of time or whatever, 2 days, 3 days, 3 months or whatever, you notify our police headquarters and we put you on a list which is called a house watch list, and we periodically make a check of your property during your absence. The school bus. Police officer in the car, he follows the school bus every morning, which is very reassuring to the residents. You put your child on the school bus or at the school bus stop, you know that officer is close by. We're in a small area. The cars on the road continually rolling 24 hours a day. And if we can't be to any one of our residents in under 45 seconds, we got a major problem. And was the first. My great-grandfather was the first mayor of the city of Asbury Park, and I really, my roots are in Asbury Park. I grew up there before we moved to Allenhurst in 1961. 1970, after the riots in Asbury Park, as we all know, the city of Asbury Park has deteriorated quite a bit. New Jersey State Police, they had grouped together in the city of Long Branch before they came into Asbury Park, and the day they came down Ocean Avenue, in a continuous line of nothing but New Jersey State Police patrol vehicles. It was impressive to some, but it was very depressing to others. We were all armed. I know that was a concern for a lot of people. You know, were you really armed with rifles and shotguns and so forth? Yes, we were, because we had people in the old Shore Dairies building on Main Street at Edgemont and Main. There was a building there where the dairy was, and they had a balcony that overlooked Main Street. And we had 2 men positioned up there in the event that any infiltration would come across the lake.